Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Full Press Fantasy Live, or FPC Fantasy Live, full press coverage. I'm here. My name is Kyle Senra. I'm co host of the Full Press Fantasy Pod, which is a weekly, and sometimes in the off season, even twice a week podcast focusing on fantasy football. So every week, my co host Brad Harvin and I, we get together, we preview those week's games. Usually, those episodes will come out either Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, but as always, I'll be here every Sunday morning to talk about start sit decisions, injury reports, active inactive list once that comes out, usually close to 12 noon. So in about a half hour here, we'll consult that just to get the final word on who's in, who's out. I'll talk a little bit about some questionable players for the later game slates, so we won't have the information on if they're in or out now, and some things I'm doing to prepare for those players. I noticed this week there was quite a few Monday players that were early in the week questionable. It seems like most of them are going to play. So there's good news there for sure. As always, though, I will start by talking about my own start sit decisions. And what are the things I'm looking at to help people with maybe my specific decisions, but also the process behind which we make those decisions. Again, FPC Fantasy Pod process is a big part of what we do, not just telling people the players to pick, but explaining why we're picking players and help people make their own analysis, give them the tools and things to utilize for that. You can, of course, check out the Full Press Coverage website, fullpresscoverage.com. Fantasy football wise, I usually write two articles per week, one of which is technically an article, just my rankings, but counts as an article officially. But yeah, you can check out my rankings every week. I'll be on fullpresscoverage.com. Those will usually be out Tuesday at some point, maybe even Monday if I'm ambitious enough. Usually Tuesday will come out, and then Wednesday or Thursday I'll put out the goal line guide article. That is a legit article. There is actual writing. There's you put a table in that article explain my process, but I also give each team what I call goal line grade, which I split. They each team has a rushing and passing goal line grade. Essentially, just a way to visualize which teams are more likely to score touchdowns on any given week and in which way. A lot of it is based off of usage and efficiency inside the five, both offensively but also defensively. A lot of stats that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. So I've kind of created this because I've looked for something like this for years. So years ago, I decided I'm going to do it myself because it apparently doesn't exist. So if anyone wanting that information, again, fullpresscoverage.com. When talking about some of my start sit decisions, I will bring up the goal line guide. So yeah, we'll get to that real soon. Um, yeah, so actually, yeah, let's bring up the spreadsheet right now. If anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to head over to the Full Press Coverage YouTube page or the Full Press Coverage Twitch page. Throw in your comments there. I think we're up on Facebook. Yeah, Facebook page too. So those three sources, you can throw your comments in there. I'll also be checking Twitter, so if you want to either DM me or tag me in a post, feel free. I'm at Senra Says, and I'll do my best to answer questions and bring them on here as well. If anyone ever wants to get this in advance, several days, and have their decisions put on the spreadsheet, also feel free to let me know that. DM me and ask if you want access to the sit start sheet, or and B, if you want your players featured on there, just let me know. DM and we'll definitely arrange that for sure. I love putting as much information here as possible, and so what I gathered from it is again, I take all of my teams. I got 22 lineup leagues to set, and so I just look through those teams. What are the difficult decisions? Which are the ones that I'm not sure? I'm going through my lineup. I'm not sure this player. Throw them on the spreadsheet. So give me one quick minute. I will share this, and then we will get to talking about all of these start sit decisions. So here we go. Looking at what I put together. So my list of players I'm deciding between. I'll go through each of the factors here real quick. The opponent they're playing, give me that information. The average fantasy points they've scored so far per game this year. The website projection, which is I will take it from the actual fantasy sites themselves. I know what maybe a better idea is to take it from an outside source. The reason I am doing from the specific sites is I want the specific scoring settings for each league to kind of be factored in. So that's tough to do on just an outside projection source because then I have to rarely are those available in my very specific. Okay, can I add points per carry for this one? Or like that's quite a lot of work. So what I do is I get this the production that has been scored, but also the projections. I am tailoring it for the specific league that I'm in because I want all the different scoring settings to be factored in those positions. Targets, and this will, in some cases, like you'll see, there's a quarterback that I'm not going to even bother. And honestly, for this first one here, Justice Hill, Alexander Madison. Obviously, that game I decided to go with Madison, so I benched Hill there. Were the targets super important for that? Probably not. It's all the other factors. Defensive ranking. It's the fantasy points allowed by that defense to that position. So whether if it's a running back I'm looking at that opposing defense, how many points they allow to that specific running back, and quarterback, same thing. So and how they rank. Uh, and I'm ranking based on quality of defense. So the number one ranked defense is the hardest matchup, whereas the 32nd ranked defense, that is the easiest matchup. That's kind of some sites will do it the opposite. I've just always done it that way. In my mind, I'm ranking the defense. So like the best defense, number one would be the worst match. That's just how I've always viewed it, how I've always done it. Part of it is my favorite website to use for fantasy, Reality Sports Online. That's how they rank it. The best matchup will be the 32nd ranked defense. So I've just always kept that to keep it consistent across all, which sometimes means having to convert because some sites will use instead of fewest points allowed, they'll use most points allowed. Sometimes the mental math of trying to deal with 32 teams. So it's pretty easy math to do. The implied total and the over under. I get this from the odds makers. And I usually try and get this Tuesday morning. So these are the lines that were initially set Tuesday morning. So this is the current implied total and over under. The reason I do that because these initial like Monday or Tuesday lines, this is what the odd makers actually think will happen. And then they change their lines through the weeks based on how people bet. That's that's the public that are being opinionated. There's a reason these odds makers are so good, and part of it is the adjustments they make, but I wanna know what they initially thought. What does their instinct say about these games, both with the implied total for the specific team I'm looking at, but also the over under for the combined total. And then we get to the goal line grade and the goal line grade difference. So again, you can check out my goal line guide article on Full Press Coverage every week, fullpresscoverage.com. So yeah, what I do is, and I explain the methodology in there, but real quick, I'm looking at what each team does offensively inside the opponent's 5-yard line, how many plays they run, and how many plays they pass on, and also how efficient they are at scoring touchdowns on those plays. I also look at the defense and I try to cross-reference the matchups. So again, we'll use Alexander Madison for instance. They're playing Chicago. So this 55.5 is both how efficient the Vikings are on the ground, um, running inside the 5-yard line, and how efficient the Bears are defending from inside the 5-yard line. So for running backs, it's the rushing grade. For every other position, I use the passing grade. And then the difference is a specific team's difference between the two. So if we keep going with the Alexander Madison example, as you can see here, the Vikings rushing goal line grade is 55.5, which is 40.5 points lower than their passing goal line grade. So their passing goal line grade would be like 96, I think. My math is correct. So that tells me in that situation with such an extreme, the Vikings are much more likely to throw passing touchdowns than they are to score rushing touchdowns. So don't in this instance, like that would have been the one reason where I would have gone with Justice Hill. This 68 represents actually the highest difference of any team this week. So I think it was the Raiders are much more likely to score rushing touchdowns than they are passing touchdowns. Spoiler alert, they end up scoring a passing touchdown. So it's not always perfect, of course, but that wasn't enough to make me wanna play Justice Hill over Madison, for instance. Now in the same league, this was one of the most interesting decisions I had all week, and it was became apparent to me, like, early in the week when I was doing my rankings on Tuesday. Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Sam Howell. I had them all 3 of them ranked pretty similar. I actually think I had it in this order: Howell, Goff, and Burrow. I think it was something like QB 12 to QB 14. They're all one next to each other. I have all 3 in a super flex league, so I've got to play 2 of them. My initial instinct was play Howell and play Goff and bench Burrow, which is what I did last week. Both Burrow and Howell scored over 30, and I think Goff had 40. So, like, it didn't actually matter who I picked. I crushed my opponent regardless. Kinda hoping it's the same thing here, but regardless, I decided to kinda look through the factors. So again, I fill it out for each player, and then what I put it in green is the highest each category, and if I'm only doing 2 players, I'll just put the green just to save a lot of colors. As you can see, like, next one, Tyler Boyd, Kendrick Bourne, I just put who is the highest. Now, when I have 3 players here, like Howell, Goff, and Burrow, then what I'm doing is I'm putting green the highest of each category and orange the lowest. So give me kind of a visual, like who rate well in the most categories, who rate poorly in the most categories. The first apparent thing, Jared Goff is not the lowest in any single category, and he's frankly not even that close. In fact, he's more often than not the highest. As you can see here, he's in of these 7 categories I have, he's highest in 5 of the 7, so more than half, significantly more than half. So my first instinct was, okay, first off, of these 3 quarterbacks, I should rank Jared Goff the highest. And naturally, he's the first one I'll put in the lineup. So then it really did just come down to Sam Howell versus Joe Burrow. I messed this one up, to be honest. Average is not the lowest. Burrow actually has the lowest average. But that also factors in, like, how injured he's been and stuff. But ultimately, it ends up being pretty close. So if yeah, they both end up in the negative in terms of how many categories they're better in compared to lower. Again, made Goff such the easy, obvious start. Kinda feeling like Goff's the QB1 on this team, as we all expected he would be for Burrow. But yeah, Burrow is the worst in actually 4 categories, the best in only 1, whereas Howell's the worst in 3 categories and the best in only 1 as well. So it really just comes down to, like, the direct comparisons. Howell has a better average than Burrow. Burrow's had some poor weeks through the season, but Burrow still has the highest projection of the 2, so that kinda neutrals itself out. Matchups are both middle of the pack, but technically Howell has the better matchup. However, that team is expected to score less points, and the game total is also supposed to be expected to be less. Um, yeah, the goal line grade actually does say Howell is great. 20 plus 25 for the passing game, which says a lot more likely that they'll score passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns. Burrow technically has a positive goal line grade, but it's very close, only 2.5. So the 2 Bengals goal line grades, passing and rushing, ended up being really close, and those are tricky. That's when it says, like, "Hey, it might not be great." And honestly, at a 69.5 is actually below average on the passing score. I believe the average this week for passing was, like 73. So both goal line grades for the Bengals are below average, so it's not really leaning one way or the other. Honestly, I did kinda change the rankings to lower Howell below Burrow. Um, Part of it is me not necessarily believing in this average, more believing what we saw from Burrow last week, where he put up 30 points. Looks like he's healed. The calf isn't bothering him as much. The first 4 weeks where the calf was bothering him, is that really the average I should be going off of? And I think part of that is the reason why I've gone with Burrow, 'cause if I went just based on this sheet, I probably would actually go with Howell, go with my initial ranking instinct, but looking through this, not a slap in the face necessarily, but a kind of a wake-up call to, yeah, maybe I am ranking Howell a little too highly. So I had to trust Burrow and go with that. Um, One easy one was Tyler Boyd or Kendrick Bourne, and it looks like T. Higgins is gonna play. I actually don't think that it affects Boyd too much because he's put up big weeks when both Chase and Higgins have been in, and then when one is missing, he doesn't usually do any better. His role as a slot receiver almost gets compromised when he's forced to go on the outside and replace Higgins or Chase. So if Higgins plays, I'm actually super okay with this one, leaving Boyd in the lineup and benching Kendrick Bourne. In fact, what I think I should have done was actually put Amari DeMarcado. It looks like he's not gonna start for the Cardinals today, so I think I'm just gonna actually end up playing both Boyd and Bourne and benching DeMarcado. But the reason I talk about Kendrick Bourne is, as you can see here, the names Kendrick Bourne and Tutu Atwell appear very often, and I've ended up picking up a lot of them in different leagues. Some of these are dynasty, some of these are redraft, and some of these dynasty leagues, I ended up having Bourne anyway. It's like, oh, you don't really know who the Patriots' number 1 wide receiver is. I expect it to be Juju, but let's take a late shot on Bourne anyway. Turns out I'm pretty sure he's leading the team in targets. So do I play him or not is the real question. So in a couple instances, the decision between Bourne and Atwell, I think, is interesting because I've had it a lot. So I wonder if people watching or people setting their lineups have the same decision to go with. So what am I looking for between Bourne and Atwell? Let's start here with this teachers charity league. So yeah, the reason I haven't marked anything for averages or targets, Atwell does have one complication. Okay, his average is 13.37. But last week he scored like 8.5 points. He only had 5 targets, and that is the first game Cooper Kupp played. So I think last week is more of a realistic outcome of what we can expect, both targets and production-wise, Atwell going forward. So As much as he has more targets than Bourne on the year, he has a better average fantasy points per game than Bourne. A lot of that comes from games where Cup didn't play. So if I'm just factoring in only last week, Bourne would actually win these categories. So do I put all this weight into 1 week, or do I go on the season as a whole? Kind of a tricky scenario. So I decided to just not mark that at all. If I take those two away, who looks like the better player? Now, Bourne is projected to score more points than Atwell, at least on the sleeper projections. 12.52 is compared to 10.88. So both double digits. I think part of Bourne's projection is the fact that Juju Smith-Schuster is out. However, man, this Patriots team has been awful. Like, legit, like, maybe the worst offense in the NFL. And so if you look at the implied total, the over/under, both favor the Rams and the Rams-Cardinals, 2 factors in favor of Atwell. Back to the famous goal line grade. 35. The Patriots have a passing goal line grade of 35. For reference sake, the lowest goal line grade score overall this week belonged to, um, who was it? It was 27. I remember that. I'm having a hard time remembering who it is now. Um, it's the Jags. Yeah, the Jags passing goal line grade is like 27. So 35, and the highest this week was like 122. So 35, a lot closer to that lowest minimum than it is higher. And the Patriots actually have a decent rushing goal line grade. That was really good actually, because their goal line grade difference at -56, not quite the Ravens difference of +68 for the run game. +56 for the run game is still though one of the highest this week. So against the Raiders, it looks like a lot more likely to score rushing touchdowns than passing. All to say, both because the team quality and the likelihood of passing touchdowns. I mean, neither the Rams or Patriots are likelier to score passing touchdowns than they are rushing touchdowns, which would make sense considering the players they have. And we've seen it with the Rams. They've been so run heavy and scoring so many rushing touchdowns near the goal line. Um, but the difference of -17 is a lot less significant than the -56 for the Patriots. So all to say, that's 4 reasons to play Atwell versus really only 1 reason to play Bourne. Even if you took into account, okay, I'm gonna only count the targets from last week for Atwell. I'm only gonna count his production from last week. That's 3 against 4. Um, I forgot to check the defensive rankings, honestly, because Sleeper doesn't have it anymore. So I have to usually go on a different website, and I totally forgot to input that. All to say, though, I'm pretty confident with Atwell more than Bourne, and I think it's just the confidence I have in that. The Patriots right now, it's so hard to play any Patriots players, I'll be honest. Might be starting Bourne in 1 or 2 spots, but in a lot of instances, I'm gonna not play him. And I even another league through the decision of Jahan Dotson in as well. All 3 of those guys available for that one last flex spot. This one was a little closer between Bourne and Atwell. And again, part of it is you take into account the production from last week, which again I didn't. Because technically, Atwell goes from having the most targets, and if I just counted last week and base that over a whole season, he would have the least targets. So do I mark him as a positive or a negative? It's tricky to do. And then also with production, again, Atwell goes from either the highest to the second. So Atwell scored more points last week than Dotson's been averaging. So that was one where I was comfortable saying, okay, Dotson does get the negative mark for that because regardless of how you look at it, he still ends up being. Now, I did account for that with Atwell and the fact that he has the lowest projection of the 3. That's the only category. Again, unless you're counting the targets, like 5 targets last week, which would be a 25 target pace for the course of the season so far. That would also be the lowest. But the defensive rank is great, which is why I think in this decision, I doubt it changes that significantly from one group to another, one website to another. And again, scoring settings do change a little bit, but for the most part, it looks like the Cardinals allow significantly more fantasy points to the wide receiver than the Raiders. Maybe I just saw that and decided not to add it in here, but all to say, there's a lot of reasons to not take Dotson. It's been so hard to trust him. The team has the lowest implied total, which is hilarious. With the Patriots, the over/under is really low. The Patriots Raiders are pretty close to Commanders Falcons with that. So a lot of reasons to pick against Dotson. Really, the only reason to go with Bourne again is his projection is higher. Projection is higher because I think Juju is out. Is that going to really factor in? I mean, regardless if Juju's there or not, if the offense can't move the football, it won't really matter. So probably again leaning towards Tutu Atwell. The one thing that you could put in favor of Dotson is the goal line guide stuff. Talked about it with Sam Howell earlier. 90.25 for the passing goal line grade, and then 25 plus 25 difference there. So, still the rushing goal line grade is about average, or I guess it'd be right around average. It's a little slightly under average. Yeah, yeah, a little slightly under average. I think well, no, I think it might be basically right at the average, 'cause I'm pretty sure the average this week for the rushing goal line grade was like 66, so it basically is right there. Um, and still, I mentioned earlier, both the Patriots and the Rams have higher passing goal line grades than or rushing goal line grades than they have passing goal line grades. Would affect negatively these wide receivers. Again, not negatively enough. That's the only reason to play Dotson. It's not strong enough. So I ended up benching Dotson there, and I'm gonna go with Tutu Atwell over Kendrick Bourne. I decided basically across the leagues that that seems like it's the right decision. So Tutu Atwell over Kendrick Bourne, folks. If anyone's dealing with that decision. Last one was Tutu Atwell, Jerome Ford. And the Browns, another offense I just don't have much faith in at all. I'm pretty sure this 19.25 implied total has gone down. There's a couple reasons to go with Ford. A, his own production, points per game. So even counting Atwell's first 5 weeks, first 4 weeks, and then last week, his average is still lower than what Ford has done. That includes like a week 1 where Ford basically didn't do anything. So, uh, Ford does look like the stronger producer right now. His projection is higher. The targets between a wide receiver and a running back, it obviously does favor Atwell. That's even taking into account if you only count the 5 targets Atwell got last week. Ford has 13 targets over the course of the season, but this 22 represents if you took the targets in the 3 games where Chubb didn't play, or well, 1 game Chubb got hurt, as well, and you took that over the course of a whole season, Ford would have 22 targets, still less than Atwell. The defensive rank, the 49ers allow the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs, while the Cardinals, in this scoring setting, allow the it's the 8th most fantasy points to, opposing wide receivers. Implied total obviously is higher, the over-under's a lot higher. Oops, I messed this one up too. 'Cause, yeah, 105.75, a good goal line grade. I think that's actually the highest rushing goal line grade. Because here's the thing with the 49ers. They've allowed teams have run literally 2 plays inside their 5-yard line. Both have resulted in touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. So they've got like 100% touchdown allowed inside the 5-yard line. That's only 2 attempts over the course of the whole season. Teams very rarely get in the red zone or even inside the 5. But all to say, like, those that still do count. So this one was a little closer. And with PJ Walker starting, though, I mean, like, the goal line guy difference is basically the same. Like, it does technically we're a half point away from it being tied. So there's a couple of these factors that you could almost neutralize. Still, though, I don't have any confidence in the Browns, so I'm going with Tutu Atwell. But, those are my starts and decisions. So no, sorry. Let's check the comments, and we'll see. Oh, Joel. Hmm. Good morning, Joel. Says, "Happy Sunday, Kyle. You've steered me in the right direction with your advice," and that is true. Joel's come in. I didn't do a stream last week. It was Canadian Thanksgiving, but the first 4 weeks, he asked me a question. I got it right each of the 4 times. 100%. I will say this. Not gonna lie, Joel. This is probably the hardest one we've asked to date. Needs a bit more advice. He says, "Do I start Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins?" Um, I I think I'm gonna check my rankings right now. I'm pretty sure I've got Fields ahead of Cousins, but super close. Yeah, so close. I've got Fields at QB6 this week, Cousins at QB7. So literally separated by 1 spot. The big factor there might be the fact that Cousins doesn't have Jefferson. I think that's something I'm leaning towards. Fields has been on a tear of late. So not only, really not even that much of a high floor because he hasn't rushing much, but man, he's hit the ceiling and 8 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. Like that's how you get ceiling in fantasy football is through touchdowns. So everyone's saying Daniel Jones is a high ceiling rusher. He's not. He doesn't score enough touchdowns to be a high ceiling. Heck, the problem this year with Daniel Jones is he's not even a floor player because he's put up weeks of like 3 points. So Daniel Jones has been like really bad, way worse than Justin Fields, by the way, even from a real NFL standpoint. I will push back on anyone that wants to criticize Fields that harshly and not necessarily criticize other quarterbacks. I've seen some throws where Daniel Jones is missing open receivers. Like, is that was the main criticism for Fields this year. He's not decisive. He's missing open guys. Daniel Jones has done that a ton this year. Yeah, he's constantly under pressure, taking a ton of sacks. He kind of looks like Justin Fields early last year, constantly taking sacks. Maybe you can blame that on the goal line, but this whole idea of I trust Fields more long term more than I trust Daniel Jones at this point. So from a dynasty perspective, I know I've been got Fields in three of my dynasty leagues. 12, 13 dynasty leagues. I think whatever it is, maybe 14. I can't remember. To be honest, I think it's 14 for the to get to the 22. So yeah, the three of those 14 dynasty leagues, I've got Fields, and I've tried chopping him, but I'm not gonna. I don't want to tear down from Fields. Like I want to use him, use these good recent games to try and tear up to the true elite tiers. And like for instance, most people like I've tried to Fields in a second to get Mahomes or Hurts or Allen or Herbert even. I'll throw in another quarterback like an Aiden O'Connell or a Mitch Trubisky. I'll give you two QBs and a pick for your elite QB, and most of the time it rejects. I don't really feel like giving up a at league. One league in particular, I don't have a first. In 2024, I got 2025 first, but the only offer I really got counters on was CJ Stroud. I offered again Fields in a second for Stroud, and the counter back was I needed to add a first on top of that. So the fact is, looks like Fields' dynasty value, in spite of the big weeks, has gone down. I'll probably talk about this a bit more in the full press fantasy pod this week. I'll get Dad's opinion on it, but my whole thing with Fields is I'm riding him. At this point, is he's already lost the value, and the big spike weeks he's just had hasn't helped him regain his value. Everyone is convinced the Bears are moving on from him. To be fair, I'm hoping they do, so he can go to a better team because the Bears are clearly awful. Put Fields, Falcons, the team that should have drafted him in the first place. To be fair, the 49ers and Jets also should have drafted him in the first place. But the Panthers probably should have instead of a corner as well. Like there's tons of teams that messed up not taking Fields and allowing the Bears to trade up and get him and just completely ruin him. So thanks for that, NFL. Yeah, I'll just say I'm riding Fields pretty strong. Luckily, the one league where I've got Fields and Cousins in, it's a super flex league, so I can play both. I don't have to make this tough decision like usual. But yeah, Fields is riding a good hot streak, and it's been against bad defense. He's had great matchups against the Broncos, Commanders. Vikings are another bad defense. So I say just keep riding this momentum. Go forwards with Fields. Even QB7 does feel a little high for Cousins. You don't know what it's going to be like without Jefferson. I guess part of me is thinking this is a really bad Bears defense too. I know this is the game that started the week with the second highest over under. The only one that was higher, I think, was the Thursday night game between the Chiefs and Broncos. Clearly, that hit the under. That should never have been the highest. Broncos, really? You think Broncos can score that many points? They usually hold the Chiefs down too. Like, Mahomes doesn't really have monster performances. So, even the fact that I had Mahomes still ahead of both at QB5, that kind of seems like a mistake in hindsight. Of course, hindsight's a lot easier. Yeah, long way to say I'm going all in on Fields. So, certainly in this matchup against the Vikings, I think he is the safer option than Cousins is, who again just a little bit scared of what that offense looks like without Justin Jefferson. So that's definitely my motivations there. And again, I'm all in on Fields, baby. Let's go Fields on the Falcons or any good team, please. All right, so it is 12 noon exactly. So let's get to the active inactive. Pull that up, share it with you all. Speaking of the Falcons, let's start there. Tight end John Fitzpatrick's inactive. I literally have no idea who that is. So looks like everyone's healthy and fantasy relevant players. Carolina Panthers. This was announced, I think, yesterday. To be honest, Miles Sanders is inactive. So Chuba Hubbard getting the start. I know I'm going to roll him in a couple leagues. I was hoping to maybe one of them sell him, try and capitalize, see if I can get a second. The fact that he's starting, he's not. He's a Canadian, so let's go Canada. Let's go Chuba. I know one of my very important leagues. Um, this leads into the next team, the Chicago Bears. I was going to plan to play Roschon Johnson, but, and then the news that Roschon was announced yesterday, but also the news that Sanders was out. So okay, well I'm pulling Roschon from the lineup. I'll just insert Chuba right in there. So that kind of convenient there. But yeah, in addition to Roschon Johnson being inactive, Travis Homer is also listed as inactive for the Bears. Now, Khalil Herbert isn't on this list. So what I think that means is he's been placed on injured reserve. So, I think Roschon, he's dealing with a concussion, so all he has to do is clear concussion protocol, and he'll come back, and I assume he'll be the lead back for the Bears. Khalil Herbert's going to miss the next 4 weeks. So he might be active week 10. We'll see how he's dealing with the injury there at that point. But for now, it's at the very minimum 4 weeks without Khalil Herbert. That means today Dante Foreman gets the start. I think they also activated Darrington Evans. I think they only have two halfbacks on the active roster today, and one of them is Darrington Evans, so that barely even counts. So I expect Dante Foreman to see a ton of volume today. Now, this was asked in a question. Courtney Harden on Real Deal Show. Such a great job, and we're going for two live chats. He was usually asking about the start two between Nico Collins, Chuba Hubbard, and Dante Foreman in the full PPR. I told him to bench Foreman, and I think a lot of other people were saying the same thing. Nico Collins just seems to be like automatic first volume. We'll get to the Texans in a sec in terms of who's going to be active for them, especially at the wide receiver position. But I'll just say Dante Foreman should be a good call. I still prefer Hubbard, especially in a PPR league. I feel like Hubbard's going to get more dump downs than Bryce Young. I don't know that Foreman's going to be super involved in the passing game, especially now that they kind of unlocked it with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. I imagine most targets go to those two, and Fields isn't really going to see the need to dump down because his defense is really not good. I'm a Packers fan, so I'm going to rip on the Vikings forever. Cincinnati Bengals, no real fantasy relevant players, a lot of defensive players, and lost my defensive lineman inactive, but yeah, nothing relevant, which means T. Higgins is active. He was the questionable guy coming in, so Higgins will play. I think we have seen this before in the past. Higgins is questionable. Oh, he's going to be active, and then he does something stupid in warm up or whatever, and he aggravates it, and he's not playing. And it's like never playing. So I think you can play Higgins today, but apparently, like, he's even done that. Like one of the games he did that last year, he wasn't even questionable through the week, like no injury report whatsoever, and then he bam out. So in theory, like you're never safe to play Higgins. He'll always be like there's always potential that he hurts himself in warm up, which to be fair is true for any player. Just he's done it twice in the same season. We've seen maybe guys do it. I remember Evan Ingram a couple years ago. Darnell Mooney, I think week 2 technically. Like we've seen it, but like one time for a player through their career, not twice in the same season. So I'll just say like I think you should play Higgins, but yeah, I can't blame you if you just want to keep him on the bench too. Um, Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson's out, so PJ Walker gets the start at quarterback. Cedric Tillman also out at wide receiver. He's barely been used, so that's not really of importance. And frankly, like I'm gonna play Amari Cooper in one or two spots, but like it's not looking great. Like I really don't want to, but he's kind of a guy that just like sheer volume, sheer number of targets, even if it's super inefficient with PJ Walker, still able to play well. But other than Amari Cooper, there's not a single Browns player out. Like even I think Jerome Ford is going to be hurt by just how bad this offense is. Okay, backup quarterback. Let's rely on the run game, but it's the 49ers defense. Like I love the goal line grades for the Browns this week, but man, if I mentioned that in the article too, they got a backup quarterback. They may not even get to the red zone. So these goal line grades don't even matter. Houston Texans, Tank Dell dealing with a concussion as well. He is not cleared concussion protocol, so he is inactive. However, Robert Woods was questionable. He will be in. So Robert Woods is playing as the likely number 2 wide receiver. My one fear for Nico Collins was if both Tank Dell and Woods are out. Yeah, Dalton Schultz is there, but would it be so easy for the Dolphins defense? I remember who it's Dolphins, but it'd be so easy for the opposing defense to just key in on Nico Collins. Robert Woods being out there, even if Woods himself isn't effective, I love this for Nico Collins himself. I've got him as a top 10 wide receiver. I'm pretty sure I've got him at wide receiver 9 in my rankings, PPR, of course. And so, yeah, I'm all in on Nico Collins. He's drawing targets, and the one dude that maybe has been drawing targets away from him, Tank Dell, he's out. So, yeah, big week for Nico Collins. Or it's the Saints. They're playing the Saints. They're playing the Saints, which does leave Collins potentially on Marshawn Lattimore, but maybe the Texans find ways to get him away from that coverage, man. So I'm gonna trust Nico Collins, trust the targets. Indianapolis Colts, nothing of fantasy relevance. Couple of linemen, couple defensive players. Jacksonville Jaguars. So wide receiver Zay Jones is out, as is running back Michael Hasty. Zay Jones has been dealing with an injury since week 2, and he's been kind of questionable the last couple of weeks. Just still not quite able to get healthy enough to play. Hasty is the healthy scratch. He's the 4th running back. I mean, it's not like the 3rd running back, Ernest Johnson's even getting looks. So at this point, they've even kind of taken work away from Tank Bigsby, and it's all Travis Etienne. I've got him as a top 5. running back 2 this week. So, yeah, all in on Travis Etienne. Miami Dolphins. Oh, there was talk that Chase Claypool would be active today. Nope, he is listed as inactive. So, Chase Claypool not getting the start. I remember someone actually asking on Twitter, I started seeing the question. I mean, I don't even think you need the answer here, dude. Like, Claypool's not gonna play. It seems like he might play, but what do we expect the first week? Like, I wouldn't have played him anyway. Even if he's active next week, I don't feel comfortable. Imagine most targets go to Tyreek and Jalen anyway. 2 excellent wide receivers. I mean, they're not even throwing to their tight end, which is Durham Smythe, to be fair. Like, yeah, I'd also wanna throw all my passes to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle if that's yeah, Claypool's inactive. Tyler Thompson at quarterback's inactive. Tyler Kroft, the tight end, is inactive. Those really have been the like, Skylar Thompson is the 3rd string quarterback, and it seems like Tyler Kroft, I thought he might even have chance to, beat out Durham Smythe to be the starter, and it looks like he's not even getting healthy, or like he's a healthy scratch every week, so, yeah, anyone's rostering Kroft. I'm rostering way too many Smythe, and I wanna kinda drop it. There's no way I'd wanna roster Kroft as well. In the offseason, sure, when he had a chance to be the starting tight end, the Dolphins have spoken with him, they've showed it's Durham Smythe, we're not gonna throw very much to him, but it's him. Minnesota Vikings, tight end Nick Muse is inactive, which, I mean, I've got, like, the number 1 tight end in fantasy right now, I guess technically it's Sam Laporta, but, TJ Hawkinson, right? So that's, yeah, not much of relevance there. The New Orleans Saints tight end Juwan Johnson is inactive, so that's kind of, he would maybe considered starting him. Um, those the starting tight ends are Taysom Hill, what a player, and then, the actual tight end, Austin Moreau. I'm glad to see him back and recovering from the, diagnosis he got last year. Also, A.T. Perry at wide receiver is inactive, and QB Jake Luton is inactive in the 3rd or even 4th string QB. That's, no relevance there. A.T. Perry just hasn't been able to see the field this year. He's a late draft pick. Not really much reason to roster him at this point, even in Dynasty. Seattle Seahawks, no fantasy relevant players inactive. For the 49ers, Tyrion Davis-Price is out. He was active last week when Elijah Mitchell missed, but now that Mitchell's back in fold, it looks like he'll be at least one of the 3 guys active. I don't know if he's gonna re-jump, Jordan Mason, probably. Mason did look good last week, so maybe it's the 2-3 split is like they're both like not one is the clear backup to McCaffrey. Frankly, unless I mean, it is a blow it could be a big blowout against the Browns, so maybe we end up seeing both Mason and Elijah Mitchell in this game anyway. Not really looking to play either, though. And finally, Washington Commanders, so there's a tight end, Curtis Hodges, inactive, and then wide receiver, Michael Tinsley, or sorry, Mitchell Tinsley, I should say the name properly. I don't know who Mitchell Tinsley is. I don't even know who Curtis Hodges is. So, yeah, not much relevance there. Logan Thomas still the starting tight end. McLaurin, I was gonna say Dotson, but it does look like Samuel's getting more targets and kind of playing ahead of Dotson. Or actually, it's not even more targets. They've basically seen the same amount of targets this year, but just Samuel producing, Dotson isn't. No, I think I'm gonna like go out of my way to start Curtis Samuel. I don't think I actually have him in any leagues. McLaurin's probably a strong start though, and so is Brian Robinson. I'd consider starting Sam Howell. Those are probably the only Commanders players I would want. All right, so 12:10, 5 minutes till I usually end. Go give a good 45 minutes on the stream. I'll give, last 5 minutes for anyone to either send comments on Full Press Coverage YouTube, Full Press Coverage Twitch, or the Full Press Coverage Facebook pages and the videos. I'll see them there, or, DM me on Twitter, @SunderStaz. You can also DM me through the week. Wanna talk anything fantasy, whether it's trade, start sit, waiver wire additions. Again, the spreadsheet that I showed earlier in the episode, if you want to get on that, if you want your players featured on that, just DM me in the week and I'll share the sheet with you. I'll plug in all the data. Um, and yeah, hopefully everyone has enjoyed this, not just hearing about all my Tutu Atwell, Kendrick Bourne decisions, but also like the reason I'm making those decisions. Appreciate Joel, who shows up every week, always gives me a good question to think about. This one required a lot of thought. Again, going back to Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins, I've got both ranked basically back to back in my rankings. Actually, yes, not even basically, they are back to back in my rankings. QB6 for Fields, QB7 for Cousins this week. Fields is higher, so I feel like saying go with Justin Fields. This is one where I think 2 weeks ago it was Stroud or Baker Mayfield. I had a super week just because Baker was coming off the injury. This one doesn't feel like, Joel, that you can make the wrong decision in the sense that both might really produce. They're playing each other, and both their defenses are awful. So I could expect again that right now the highest over under on the week going into the week was the Chiefs Broncos game, and that one, what did they score? 26 points total. Like it didn't even come close to like half of the over under basically. So take that away. The highest over under on the week is Bengals, sorry, Bengals, Bears, Vikings. So I expect a lot of points. I expect both Fields and Cousins to do well, but I will go with Justin Fields if having to decide between the two. But as I mentioned, I've got a lot of Tutu Atwell, Kendrick Bourne decisions to make. Going with Tutu in all those leagues, just more confidence in the Rams offense and the Patriots offense. A lot of things working against the Patriots. A lot of it is due to how bad their offense has been. And the last one was something I hinted on the Focus Fantasy Pod earlier in the week. Both with my rankings, but also my own personal decision of Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Sam Howell. How would I rank them? Initially, I actually had Sam Howell ranked the highest. Ultimately, he's now the lowest. Uh, he went from QB12 to QB14. In my rankings, they were literally 1, 2, 3 when I first did my initial rankings. QB12 for Howell, QB13 for Goff, QB14 for Burrow. I've moved Howell below, and I decided I'm going to Superflex league. I've got all three of those players. I'm going to start Goff, sure, and I'm going to start Burrow as well. And I've changed my rankings as a consequence. Sometimes that happens where I've got players ranked, and then it gets to my own decisions, and I decide to make decisions, and I realize, you know what? I actually I'm going to change my rankings to reflect what I'm doing in my which basically end this episode in a philosophical fashion. That's how I've always viewed the purpose of the Full Press Fantasy Pod. I'm going to share and just be genuine with what I'm doing with my teams, the things I'm looking at to factor into my decisions. What do I want to do with my fantasy teams? And I will then share that with people so that they can use that for their own fantasy teams. Again, I've always just what am I doing in my leagues is how I've reflected the podcast, the articles, the goal line guide. The whole idea behind it is this is data I wanted so that I could use on my teams. And I realized it wasn't available anywhere. So what I do is I actually go on ESPN the day after the game. Like I'll do it tomorrow morning. I'll go through and I'll look at the play-by-play for every game. I love that the ESPN website has that. I will track every play inside the five. I have that data because again, I have not been able to find that data anywhere. Maybe it exists somewhere behind a paywall, but I want to use that so I can put it in these goal line guides and share the goal line grades with you, the people. Yeah, I want that info, so I figure I'm probably not the only one who wants to know like goal line guide data and efficiency. Like, you can go to sites and look at the total attempts. People really focus on that. I realize like all I'm doing is just taking this data from other sites and just writing about it or talking about it. Like it was incomplete. And I realized what I'm looking for is the efficiency, the total teams. And instead of looking at specific players, how many attempts they get inside the five, I want to look at team efficiency, both on offense and defense. And the goal line guide allows me to share that with everyone, my findings. But of course, I have to share all of my thoughts here on FPC Fantasy Live every Sunday morning. Appreciate everyone listening. Again, watching. Shout out to Joel, who's always here, the best supporter we have every week, making me use my brain and think of starts the decision. So hopefully, Joel, I go 5 for 5 on this, and Fields beats Cousins. Even if he does, I think Cousins will score enough that it'll be if it's a loss, it won't be a major loss. Hopefully, still win your matchup regardless of either quarterback. But I think Fields is going to have a good week. Yeah, great show. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the kind thoughts. Again, appreciate all the support from everyone who every week listens to the Full Press Fantasy Pod, but also watches this stream every Sunday morning here on FPC Fantasy Live. I'm Kyle Sendo. I will see you next weekend. Bye for now. Have a great fantasy